So when we're talking about gardening with youth, it's most important to remember to keep it simple. It's not going to look like Pinterest or Better Homes and Gardens, and that's okay. Kids have a lot of fun doing their own thing and being creative, so it's important to encourage that. And it's important to keep it light and easygoing. I sometimes get a little hung up because this is what it's supposed to look like, and A is supposed to match with A and B with B. But when you're working with kids, you got to let a lot of that go and just have a good time. It's also important to keep your time frame short and things simple because kids have a short attention span and they have little fingers, and sometimes it's hard for them to do tasks. So some things that you can do to make it easy and simple for youth to participate in your garden is watering is a great way for them to help, although I learned the hard way, don't turn them loose with the hose. We had a flooded fairy garden this year. But a great way is to use a half-gallon milk jug and you poke holes in the lid, and it can be used as a watering can, and not nearly as much water comes out, and it's easy for kids to use and has a good handle for them to pack around, and it makes it really nice for watering in the garden. Another thing that you can do with your kids that helps get some of the prep work out ahead of time, because they don't like to wait around while you get seeds together or while you rototill or while you get your rows ready or your tools out. So to prep ahead of time, you can take seeds and using a flour and water paste, glue them to some toilet tissue at the appropriate spacing that they need to be planted in. That way you don't get 65 carrots on this side and you skip a couple feet and then you get another 65 carrots. You can space them out appropriately. The cheaper the toilet tissue, the better. It degrades better in the soil, and then kids can take this right out to the garden, lay it in the prepared row and cover it up and have a lot of fun. You can do some of the prep work ahead of time before you're outside in the garden. Because sometimes things get messy when we're working with kids, and we have to remember that and that it's okay. They like to have a good time. Actually, at my house, I finally gave up, turned one of my flower beds into what we call the messy garden at our house, and we turn them loose with the hose and shovels and let them dig and play in the mud and have as much fun as they want and get dirty, because that's what they like to do. So we just allow a space for them to do that. And then kids also like to take it a bit further, not just plant the seeds, but talk to them about seed germination or talk to them about photosynthesis or the water cycle. It's a great opportunity to incorporate some learning while you're hands-on doing some activities, and the kids will incorporate that knowledge better. And it's amazing how even little ones can learn about the water cycle if you explain it as you're working through the process. So that's really fun ways to make gardening fun for kids. And there's lots of fun types of gardens you can have that interest youth. One of my favorites, and it's really popular right now, are fairy gardens. They're very popular. We have a fairy garden at our house. This is actually the fairy house that my kids built for their little fairy garden. They built that all themselves. It's kind of crazy, but they had a good time doing it and they love it. And it's a fun way to just add whimsy to a part of the garden that kids really enjoy. We got these lights at the dollar store, and we put the battery in a Ziploc bag and hide it under a shell and put it in the fairy garden and turn the lights on at night, and the kids really like to do that. So it's an inexpensive way to add some whimsy. And then of course fairy gardens are very popular right now, so you can purchase all sorts of fun little accessories and things like that to put in your fairy gardens, and kids really enjoy playing with those and moving the parts around. We've started changing ours seasonally, so now it has pumpkins in it and little scarecrow figurines we found and stuff so they can make it fall-y. Tonight's prize is actually a fairy garden kit, so some lucky person will be all ready for their fairy garden. But it's a fun way to incorporate some fun activities for kids into your garden. You can do it in a flower bed, in a barrel designated just for a fairy garden, or just a corner of your garden or your yard. So they're really fun to include. Kids also like to engage their senses when they're outside in the garden, so a touch garden can be really fun. This very sad looking lamb's ear, keep in mind it was harvested yesterday and drove all the way from Salmon, so it's looking a little tired. But this lamb's ear is really soft and fun for the kids. It grows like a weed. It does really well without a lot of attention, and it's something fun you can incorporate in the garden. And I'm actually going to give this away tonight too. With a little water, it'll perk right up in a few days. It's just tired of traveling right now. And trust me, you can't kill this stuff, so it's all right. It'll be fine. Some lucky winner gets a half-dead lamb's ear, but it'll be okay. It'll perk right up, I promise. So that's a fun way to incorporate some of the senses into your garden. You can also do a smell garden, so incorporating some herbs. One of our sponsors tonight is the Idaho Mint Commission, and we have mint growing in our garden. This too looking a little tired after its long journey over here, but this is some mint that we have growing in our garden, and my kids really like it. It's got a square stem on it, so it's fun for them to feel. All members of the mint family actually have a square stem, which is kind of cool, and kids like to play with that, and it smells great, and they like to chew on the leaves, and they think it's really fun. We also have a little herb garden at our house, so these are some of the herbs that were still mostly alive after our snowstorms, and the kids like those. They smell different. You can do flowers that have a strong smell, anything like that in a sensory garden. Kids really like to participate in their gardens, and if you incorporate kids into growing their own vegetables and fruit, they're more likely to eat them. So an easy to pick garden is always fun. Things like radishes or summer squash, green beans, peas, things like that that kids can pick as they're out in the garden and eat fresh out of the garden. They really enjoy doing that. It's also fun to do unusual things. This year we grew banana squash, and they were this long and this big around, and it took both my kids to lift it into their little red wagon to tote it over to the house, and they had a great time watching to see how big they'd get all summer long. Mini pumpkins, giant pumpkins, anything that's kind of different than what they see at the grocery store. Jerusalem artichokes, things like that are really fun for kids to grow unusual things in their gardens. Butterfly and pollinator gardens are also really fun. This little pack, it is from the Montana Pollinator Project, and we got it at our local extension office. So you can check with your local extension office to see if they have an outlet where it's a possibility to get some of these. But these are just different seeds that are native to the area that are great for butterflies and other pollinators. So that's really fun for kids to do too, plant their own pollinator garden. And then of course it's Idaho, and it's winter. So the terrarium is a great way to bring gardening indoors throughout the winter. This is our terrarium from our house. These are succulents we had growing outside that we brought in over the winter. And my kids like playing in here, and they have a little turtle in there, and you can even make little fairy gardens. So that's kind of a fun way to bring things inside. And it's also fun to start your own seeds. You can do that with your kids, and an egg carton is a really great way to do that. You can put a little potting soil in here and a seed in each one, and let them sprout in a warm place. I like on top of my refrigerator, works well, it's out of the way and warm. But you can start your own seeds and then take them outside, and you can just cut the egg carton and plant it right inside the egg carton. So it's really fun and easy for kids to do. So that's a fun way to bring gardening inside. And because our sponsor is the Idaho Mint Commission, I wanted to give you guys just a few tips on growing mint in your garden. It likes to have well-drained soil, likes morning sun and afternoon shade, and it will grow like a weed. So if you don't want it to spread, you can plant it inside a larger container in the ground, and then the roots won't spread, or keep it heavily mulched, and that'll keep it from spreading. But it's really fun. You can pick it fresh before it flowers, and that's a great way to use your mint leaves. I also love it when it flowers. It has a beautiful purple blossom, and it makes a great fresh arrangement and smells fabulous in your house. So mint's a really fun one to incorporate in your kids' garden and help get them interested in gardening. So that concludes everything I have to say to you guys about youth and gardening. Do you have any questions? Feel free to ask questions. I'm the first one, so nobody wants to ask them. Yes. Mm-hmm.
How did you waterproof it?
It actually does. It has drainage holes on the bottom. It has, so I set a paper towel underneath it on my table, and when I water it, I make sure I put a towel under it when I water it. But because they're succulents, they don't need watered very frequently, and it has a gravel base to hold that moisture and let it drain, and then there's potting soil on top.